Committee Member Jim Hines of Connecticut. Congressman, thank you for joining me. You've just seen a couple of military experts talk about the very difficult situation we're in. You've got some concerns about sending advisors. Share with me what those concerns are.
Yeah, I do, Governor. Thank you for having me. And I thought the officers that you had earlier did a pretty good job of kind of painting the picture of what's happening on the ground. But, you know, when we think about how we are going to get involved, or if we're going to get involved here, I think we need to kind of sit back and ask ourselves what our fundamental interests are. And I would suggest to you, Governor, that our fundamental interest in Iraq and in Syria and in Libya and, you know, in all of these areas that are having such challenges is very clear, and that is to go after, in an aggressive way, the relatively small number of fighters, whether they're in Al-Qaeda or in ISIL, that have transnational ambitions. That's a big word, which means they want to come after us or after Europe or after Israel. Beyond that, I would suggest that we have to avoid, and I think the general made this point, we really have to avoid at all costs being perceived to be on anybody's team in this Shiite versus Sunni civil war that is happening in Syria and in Iraq. And I fear, and you were right, I have profound concerns about the president's plans to send advisors because, let's face it, first of all, there's an open question about whether there really is something called Iraq anymore. Remember, Iraq was created by the British Empire, 90 years ago. And whether the Iraqi army, such as it is anything other than a Shiite militia at this point. So my fear, Governor, is that we are signing up to essentially coach one of the teams in a very ugly three-way conflict.
I think what you're saying, Congressman, is that picking a winner here doesn't make sense because none of them are winners for us. They're all losers for us in terms of they're fundamentally going to be against the interest of States and the friends like Israel that we have in the region.
Well, I'm not sure that that's true. Look, ISIL are a bunch of very bad people, absolutely, and they have people within ISIL that we frankly want off the battlefield, as my friends in the military say. But remember, the current prime minister who we're supporting, apparently supporting, is very much an ally of the Iranians. It's not clear that the Kurds, the Kurds aren't, they're actually our friends. So really, I think what we need to be doing here is doing what we're doing in places like Yemen in ways that I can and can't talk about. In places like Yemen and in Syria and in Pakistan and Afghanistan, we need to say, you guys need to work this out. Whether there's an Iraq in the future or three, a Shia, a Sunni, and a Kurd state, that's for you guys to work out. But if you support people who are coming after us, you're going to have a very bad day. That's essentially what we're doing in the region, and I think that's the right approach. And, this idea of a caliphate, it is scary, but you need to step back and remember that if terrorists have a state, they have addresses. And we know where to go for them. Where it's hard for us is when they're in caves or in the woods or in, areas of total chaos. If there were to set up a Sunni state, first of all, maybe that state doesn't become terrorist. Remember back in the Iraq War, these guys were so brutal that the Sunnis themselves turned on their own people. But if there is a state, there are addresses and we can find people.
Congressman, appreciate your being here and your perspective. Great to have you on. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks a lot, Governor.